Hello and welcome to the Workwise for Screen podcast, created to help our screen industries better look after all the people their businesses depend on.
And stay on safe legal ground. It's part of a growing collection of practical resources and guidance that you can dip into without it taking you forever or costing you anything. It's supported by the BFI, awarding national lottery funding.
We'll be talking with people across production, distribution and exhibition, animation, VFX and gaming about the challenges to well-being we face when deadlines and budgets are tight, and how, most importantly, to improve things. We are your hosts, Tacita Small from the Small HR Company, the HR for Entertainment one,
and Keith Arrowsmith, the legal one, a creative industries solicitor and program director for Workwise for Screen. One of the things I have to do, Tacita, is help businesses and organisations think about the right level of transparency when we're talking about governance. And almost always, good governance needs a level of transparency to make sure people can engage with those processes in a way that's really helpful. Do you get the same when you're thinking about HR?
Yeah, I suppose when it comes to HR, people are always very nervous about what they can and can't say, whether that be, within the team or when it comes to like leadership or managers in the team. And then the other layer we get is the company and everybody else. So I suppose everyone's a little bit confused as to what they can share and they can't share, and the reasons behind why they can or can't share their stuff.
We've got to be really careful about people's personal data. We've kind of realised that there's an obligation to look after people's personal data, which means that we're all a bit cautious nowadays before sharing any of that. So it does feel complicated because you have to come at it from so many different ways.
Yeah, depending on your role and what access you have to what information for your role. Yeah, I suppose it can be. I know that it can be confusing.
But when we're talking about businesses, we also talk about confidentiality, don't we? And there's going to be some details about the projects we're all involved with that are really time sensitive. And when we're on tight deadlines, again, we might be overcautious on what we're allowed to share and what's not appropriate on any one particular moment. So I think that's another layer, isn't it? What's going to be the right thing to do about confidentiality and that top secret, valuable information that we mustn't share because it puts the whole project in jeopardy. And especially for those that might join a project halfway through, they have to learn really quickly what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. So having some framework to help people understand how that might work and the benefits of getting the right level of transparency feels as though it's going to be really important.
Yeah, definitely. Let's have a transparent conversation about it. Today we're joined by Elizabeth Peyton-Jones, the founder of Talent Trust. Talent Trust operates across the UK, USA and Europe to support film and TV productions in creating safer, more transparent workplaces.
They produce end-of-production reports which identify successes and areas of improvement. Recent clients include Apple and Tall Story Collective. Elizabeth will talk to us today about what has been going well in the industry and what we still need to do to improve working practices.
Hey, Elizabeth.
Hi.
Elizabeth, could you tell us about the Talent Trust and what it does?
Talent Trust is an independent organisation that delivers QR codes to productions anywhere in the world to crew and cast so they can get feedback that matters. We have 4 types of surveys: pre, mid and post-production surveys, and an open text bot which can be accessed at any time throughout the production.
Well, tell us a little bit about how you come into this realm, Elizabeth. Yeah, I know you have done lots of work with the Talent Trust. So tell us how you got interested in the work in this sector.
So specifically in the creative industries, I was looking into why I personally was getting so many people through my door that had been necessarily damaged by this industry, and why there wasn't anything really set up for it. This was before Me Too, Time's Up, Black Lives Matter, all of that kind of stuff. So just to caveat that, a lot has changed, but it's a hugely complex industry and very, very interesting. And I mean, we've been at it for like 4 years now, piloting anonymous surveys to better understand what's happening within the industry itself. And now we have a pretty good system going, and we've got very good data to better understand that complexity.
Let's touch on that complexity. What is it about the screen sector that makes it complex?
The very dynamics of it make it complex. So you have extreme hierarchy. I mean, it is in any job really, but you have a few people with a lot of power. You have money ring-fenced around those important people, which means that even if you are in a senior position, you often can't act. Often decisions are made by a larger broadcaster or streamer because they've paid for the production, so you can't do very much about it if you're a production company sometimes. And then added to which, by the time you're a runner or a trainee in the industry, you're so eager to keep your position. You don't really want to call things out and be transparent like you were talking about. By the time somebody's whistle blown, it's because they've had so many problems, so many things unchecked, unseen, unheard, so much damage that they just don't care anymore. They don't care about their own jobs. They don't care about anybody else's. They're just out to really voice it. At Talent Trust, we're picking up what's happening down the pipeline, so we can better understand, how people are feeling as it unfolds, so that it's a preventative tool. But even that has its challenges.
Sure. I guess by the time someone is thinking about whistleblowing, their relationship with the sector has got to crisis points, and it's going to be really hard to rescue that. But thinking about it from a production point of view, earlier in that process, the changes that we can start thinking about to make sure that never happens again feels really important. So let's start thinking about those kind of changes that you've seen happen or you'd like to see happen within production companies. Do you have a sense of what would be top of the list if you were talking to the production companies today that they ought to have at their fingertips?
We know our data is very clear that psychological safety is up there with, performance and everything, physical safety as well as conduct, etc. But how do you make people feel psychologically safe? And it feels like it's one of those things that are unobtainable or you can't predict. But actually that's not true. What our data has found very, very clearly is that it starts at the very beginning. I mean, you're talking about contracts and you're talking about signing that contract and knowing what your role is. Well, it starts there. I mean, often these people are pushed into a contract so late they haven't even read it, which means that later what happens is if they do want to complain, somebody says, well, you signed the contract, you knew what you were set up for, but they weren't given time. Equally being prepared, all of our data shows that, those people that basically didn't know their way to work weren't given the proper preparation tools at the very, very beginning, felt psychologically unsafe if they weren't given the food that they were expecting, or it's the small things. And then suddenly what you have is a wall of silence. So they felt so unsafe just through all of those small things. When something big happens, they don't want to speak up because they know they already haven't been supported in the most minor level, that to really voice anything that's considerably bigger, they simply won't do.
Is that even with those organisations that say that they're going to be transparent? Because I think I wanted to go back a little bit and just establish what that word transparency even means to somebody who's on a production. Does transparency mean that you're going to be honest with me throughout this relationship? Does it mean that what we say we're going to do, we do? Like, what does that transparency, what does that translate as?
The thing is that most of the stories we hear out there are pretty much the gloomy ones.
Yes.
And in fact, people do really well. There are very, very high performing sets. And yes, transparency is when you have a strong director and a strong producer and strong line manager, and management team knows how to manage people, and that people are being heard, and that being heard is related to an action which they then feel. So if you have that, which is perfectly attainable, we know because we've been on productions where it's really worked well, then you've got a high performing, highly transparent set.
Makes sense.
But for those people that are saying we want to be transparent, but then haven't given the contracts on time, haven't let people read it, when they come to say something's wrong, they're shut down. But then on social media, they're saying they're transparent
Yes.
and they're this, that, and the other. And by the way, that's when people get really angry, because their social media is saying one thing, but they're being treated as something else. So yeah, I mean, that's when you get very, very, very angry people, not surprisingly, because they're going to work every day and suffering unheard. Although even if they do try to make themselves heard, then they're not heard.
That makes a lot of sense to me, because sometimes the word transparency, what do we actually mean by that? But you're right. If you're saying one thing and then doing the other, then it's not clear.
But it also introduces doubts, doesn't it? Because if you can't trust someone with the simple stuff, then why would you trust them with the more complicated stuff? And you and I know, Tacita, if we're not following policies and procedures that are laid down as the way we work, we're just storing up trouble for later on, because it invites people to challenge those processes and say that they weren't in place and we don't trust them anymore.
And that's it, Keith, because you can have all the policies and procedures that you want on a set, all of them. But then if it's not a well-prepared set, has anybody read them? I mean, do the crew and cast actually know what kind of bullying and harassment standards they've got? No, not really. So do they feel safe? Not particularly. Do they even know if something goes wrong, who the person is they're supposed to be contacting? No. So, that's why at the moment, this anonymous tool is we've found has been helpful to productions to better understand, you know what, we didn't actually do the preparation very well. Potentially we need to send out the bullying and harassment statement again because people haven't read it. Because when you ask that question, only 40 people have said they've seen it. And only at that 40%, only 20 have read it. That's not good.
One of the techniques I think might work well is that feedback loop, that sense of how do we know whether we're being transparent enough? How do we know that people have got access to the right resources? What do you suggest for people as a starting point?
I mean, obviously, that's why we set up Talent Trust. It's so that you can anonymously pick it up through a suggestion box or through any of our surveys. But basically, if you don't have that, it is a question of potentially heads of department going and chatting to, their makeup group or their lighting or editing, whatever it might be, and saying, hey guys, have you got this? Did you read XYZ, or do you know what's happening? Or do you feel that you've understood, the policies by which we are running this set? And in that way, you get cozy with your production head and lead, but also it gives them a very concrete view of the seriousness by which they're taking the standards or conduct policies by which they're working from. And it's very, low maintenance thing to do. And then the department heads can then talk back to the head of production. So you've got this kind of like line of clear communication going on throughout. It doesn't cost anything. It costs very little time, really.
What I do like about that is not just a let's find out at the end and everyone's gone home and fingers crossed somebody will answer this. It's like prep, mid-shoot, post. There's so many great opportunities here that you picked up on, that where you can get that feedback on how everyone is feeling and thinking about that production.
Yeah, I mean, it's very important. I mean, as we were talking about, the preparation for a production is one of the most important things to get right, because without it, you don't have that psychological safety, which means you don't have physical safety. You don't have high performance. You have mistrust. You have silence. And people think if people are silent, then it's a good thing. But actually, silence is a really bad thing. It's really good if people are coming up to you and saying, hey, look, I hate the coffee. It's like, give me a new brand, or whatever it might be. It's that. Because apart from anything else, you get burnout quicker. People burn out quicker the more they feel psychologically unsafe.
But there is something about that sense of a little bit of investment in time and process reaps lots and lots of rewards later on, because we're not then looking at a workforce that is facing burnout or whistleblowing that brings in the lawyers. So can you help us understand the kind of data you collect that gives us the comfort that this is the right thing to do?
So we do a pre-production survey, which basically picks up everything like, have you read the bullying and harassment statement, or any safety manuals that need to be read? Have you received your scripts? Because often the scripts are last minute. Do you feel prepared for your role? Do you know who your head of department is? That sort of question. It's really to sort of like set the person up. And if it does nothing else, it probably makes them think about those questions, so that they then can go out and say, oh, look, actually, who is my head of department, or whatever it might be, so they can actually go and seek that out. If you get a low score, then you can sort of send the survey out. Make a change and then send the survey out again, so that that you're doing better. Kind of gamifies it, because obviously then people want to do better. So they're like, oh yeah, okay, now we're getting better. And then halfway through, there is a mid-production check. So it's just a temperature check, really, just to make sure that everybody is doing well, is happy. There are no major concerns, etc., etc. And then we do a much larger post-production, which really talks about the entirety of the production. So sometimes these productions have gone on for a year, and they'll be looking back over that year, sometimes it's only 3 months, in which case it'll only be that. But it talks about really conduct. What was the conduct like, the safety, the preparation, etc., etc. So you get the production company gets that snapshot as a whole, so they know, and then we consult, obviously, and they can then take that forward to the next production, so that they know how to do that better. But all the way through, and most importantly, the entire production is a suggestion box, which is open at any time for people to drop in any suggestion they want, from, we love this crew, this is going really well, loving it, our time here, love the hiatus, whatever it might be. So there's an open text box throughout. Everything is totally anonymous.
Yeah. What's the percentage of positive feedback against the kind of negative? Do you get a sense of people enjoying the fact that they can engage in that kind of way, or do you think people are still nervous about it, even though it is anonymous?
Well, both statements are true. I think people are nervous, even though it's anonymous, and especially at the very beginning. So often we have to go down to sets and say, listen, with a friendly face behind the QR code, blah, 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 and listen to whatever it is. And then we often get an uptick.
Right.
But we also find that if we've done a survey and the production company have acted on a particular point, like the coffee or the catering or something small, like, having a dry area for wet clothes because everything's outside, things like that, anything like that, or safety, and they act immediately, we get immediate feedback in the suggestion box saying, thank you so much. It's so nice to be listened to. We've never had this before. It's so wonderful. And that gives them confidence then to speak up.
There's something about that feedback loop that enables the production company to be rigorous in the interventions it's making, because they've got the confidence that it's making a difference, rather than worrying that there are 101 things that they could be doing. By introducing one or two little things at the beginning and testing what it does to the relationship with the team, gives you the comfort that you are doing something that's valuable and valued and can make the difference for the next project. So I'd like to just talk a little bit about diversity.
Well, interestingly, our data has shown that despite the fact that there is a lot of diversity on set, especially when it comes to cast, when we've looked at the satisfaction levels, in fact, the satisfaction levels are at least a point, which is about 20% lower every single time. And it's the same disability. So, however, if there is a diverse element to the production, then it's showing that there is not enough support. Our post-production survey has a demographic section. We also have a prefer not to say button. So we are able to pick up and then dig deeper into the questions and find out if there was a very low score, for example, who scored lower.
So the lesson seems to be that if you have a diverse workforce, be prepared to offer the right level of support for the right people. It's not one size fits all. It's always hard, isn't it? Because those are the kind of things that don't typically have a monetary value attached to them. We know how much it costs to hire a piece of equipment, but we don't have that inbuilt sense of the damage that I can do to my reputation if we're not supporting a loyal team to help deliver the services that we've promised to do by a deadline. So I think that's a bit of human nature, isn't it? That we love dealing with the things that we can deal with on a day-to-day basis. But sometimes it's really hard to take that step back and think about it strategically. What do we need to do to protect our reputation? What do we need to do to support a loyal workforce? And that level of transparency feels to me to be one of the most important tools that we have that might not cost us huge amounts of time and effort.
Hiring more diverse talent is essential, but it's just one step. It's not the finish line. And that's what our data really is saying, because if someone is cast or booked that feels unsupported or unseen or unsafe, that's not inclusion. That's exposure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, well, it's been great. Thank you.
What was the important thing that you took out of today's conversation?
I think the important thing that I took out of it was that actually it can feel quite intimidating or overwhelming to think that we have to create an environment of transparency, when actually what that kind of related back to me was that we need to have good, clear, open communication. And nothing more than that. If you get that bit right, everything else will fall into place, whatever you call it. But good, clear, open communication as early on as possible within a production will set you up for success.
And it doesn't happen by accident. You need to plan for good communication. You need to give people time to think about how to do it properly. And that might mean training, it might mean resources, but those kind of interventions don't need to be big changes in a business. It's just those little points at an early enough time where you can build in those feedback loops. And all of a sudden you've got a reason for change, a reason to help people realise what's going to be the better way of dealing with things for this particular set of workers on this particular project.
You're right. There's clear feedback loops. It's about intentionality. If you set up and make an intention and you plan, this for you could be the space in which you're creating that really healthy workplace culture.
And it's not just about the nightmare scenarios. This also gives you an opportunity to hear about the things that go really well and the things that people really value. And it might just be as simple as changing the brand of coffee, but it could be the thing that builds that loyalty that can make a big difference to your bottom line.
Yeah, it's so important to emphasize the positive because it's not always about the negative. If you're doing something well, really shout about it. That creates that currency of trust.
And if you have got a diverse workforce, then look after them. And that might mean taking a little bit of extra time or thinking about doing things slightly differently in order to give all of the workforce the kind of support that they particularly need.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks for listening to the Workwise for Screen podcast, supported by the BFI awarding National Lottery funding.
Our online platform provides lots of easy to understand information and invites to our events. Visit our website at workwiseforscreen.org.uk and register for the latest updates.
Please follow us on social media and join in this crucial conversation.
And contact us with suggestions for future episodes, or if you can, support the programme in any other way. This podcast is produced by 1860. Music is by Benjamin Squires.